Hello, beautiful souls. If you're new here, my name is Alyssa, and Spirit has guided me to share my spiritual awakening story for this video today. And this is a story I've never fully shared with anyone. It's going to be a vulnerable share. However, my intention is for this to reach anyone who needs to hear it now. As you know, we have been going through a massive awakening on this planet, and I feel it's more timely than ever to share this message. I want to discuss that this story that I'm going to share is my own personal lived experience. It is something that my soul chose. It is not a story of struggle, and it is not a story that these experiences happened to me. They happened for me, and I just want to reiterate that. On February 24th, 2024 was the day that my entire life changed overnight. And I will forever look back and mark that date as before February 2024 and after February 2024. I am so excited to share this experience with you. This is going to be a longer video as I'm feeling into the energy. So grab a tea, coffee, or a drink of your choosing. I got mine here. A blanket, a snack. Let's get comfortable. And I'm so excited to be sharing my journey with you. So let's get started. Let's rewind to 2019. I landed my dream job in San Diego. I was driving distance to the beach and I was so excited. The location was perfect. However, the job was not aligned. I had a very large caseload. I was under very stressful meetings with lawyers and advocates and angry families. And I had a work-life balance that was unsustainable. And this began to impact my mental health immediately. And my body began to whisper that this was out of alignment. A few months later, COVID hit the world. And the stress from my job, in addition to what was happening in the world, snowballed. And I had energy and emotions that were trapped in my body that were stagnant, and ultimately it led to physical symptoms, which then manifested into multiple chronic illnesses. And I made a tough but necessary decision to fly home across the country and to live with my parents while I figured out what was going on. I was questioning, how did my life go from travel and freedom and independence to suddenly a life where I was managing my own health, and I had a calendar now filled with doctors and specialists and assessments and therapists that I was going to. At the age of 30 years old, and someone who was in the helping profession, who helped people get back on their feet, this was a challenging and humbling experience for me. This year, where I was experiencing health issues, forced my body into stillness. As I was bedridden and in pain, and I wasn't able to take care of myself independently. And I began to question my purpose in this life. I dedicated my entire life and my identity to my job. And when I didn't have that piece of me, I didn't know who I was. And I began to question why I was here. I remember in some of the darkest days that I had, I ended up returning to Christianity. I did attend Christian school for most of elementary school, and I was at a loss. I was at a last resort, and I dived deep back into the Bible, attending Bible study groups and praying every day for a sense of relief from what I was experiencing. And fortunately, one of my prayers was answered, and I found a therapist that helped me learn about meditation, inner child work, as well as somatic practices to help regulate my nervous system. With dedication to these practices, my nervous system finally settled, and every single day I was able to celebrate the small wins. Walking to the mailbox, making my bed, taking a shower were huge wins for me. And eventually I was able to gain the strength, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally, to be able to start applying for jobs again. And I applied for a job, I interviewed, and I got the job instantly. And that meant moving an hour away to live independently again. This was a huge celebration, as before I never thought I would be able to live independently again. And I was very excited for this new chapter in my life. I was extremely grateful for my body's resilience to be able to get to this point in my life again and to be able to work. And I felt like that experience taught me that immensely. So after starting that job and getting into it a little bit more, I started to notice the same patterns were returning. I felt a dread every Sunday evening that I knew that Monday I would be starting work again. I counted down the hours until I was done. And I noticed that every city and every different job that I lived in, the same pattern continued. And other people were experiencing the same thing as me. I thought it was normal. We clock in for our 9 to 5. We get home. We have a few hours to ourselves to make dinner, to maybe watch TV, spend time with our kids, and then we go to sleep and we repeat the same thing. And it felt like I was on a hamster wheel. I began to question, how am I going to keep doing this up until I'm 65 years old? I had a great salary. I had wonderful benefits. I even had a pension. And I knew that is what kept a lot of people in that situation, and it is what kept me in that job for 3 years. But I felt like there was more to life than how I was living. I was living for the weekends, or even those evenings that I had a few hours to myself, but I was so drained from the week that my weekends were not fulfilling. It was me frozen on the couch, unable to move because I was tired and exhausted and mentally preparing myself for the next week ahead. It just felt like a never-ending loop that would not stop. On one of the weekends I was home, I received a phone call from a friend that I used to work with in this job that I had. However, when I picked up the phone, it wasn't her. It was her sister. And she was calling to tell me she had some news. And my friend passed unexpectedly. And she was the epitome of someone who dedicated her life to service, putting others before herself. And she not only retired for only a year and bought a house, but the stress from all of the years of working and overgiving and being in a stress and burnout cycle caught up to her health. And that cracked my foundation. I wasn't expecting it, and it changed how I viewed life and death, and it peeled back another layer of the onion of, why am I here? There has to be something more than this. And as I was going through the motions, I was sitting in my car on my lunch break one day, and all of a sudden, I just started crying, and I felt like I was having a midlife crisis, and I wasn't understand what was going on. I knew I was feeling anxious and depressed, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do to get myself out of it. But the two options that came to mind were talk therapy, into returning to that like I've done before. And the next option seemed quite random: Reiki. I was introduced to Reiki during a placement in my field work when I was in school. And it seemed random, but I kept it as an option. So my mind immediately went to what was familiar: talk therapy. I found the best clinic in town, immediately called them, left a voicemail, emailed them, and I did that for 2 days. They were supposed to be very responsive from what I've heard. I did not receive any follow-up, and I ultimately knew that this was a sign. My soul was guiding me to take this Reiki class. So I did. And what is to come next is just unbelievable. Leading up to the Reiki class, it was a Friday evening, and I was speaking to one of my coworkers about our weekend plans, and I was telling her, I'm taking a Reiki class. I'm really excited to see what's going to come from it. Just completely going in with an open mind. As I was driving home, only a few minutes from home, I was sitting at a traffic light. The traffic light turned green. I start driving. All of a sudden, this car from the other lane pulls in front of me, catches me off guard. I look at the license plate. It says Reiki RM. As soon as I see it, it pulls away back into its lane. And as I'm saying this, I'm getting full body chills. It was an unbelievable confirmation, something that I've never experienced before. But in my soul, I knew that was a sign that I was on the right path. The next day, I took the Reiki class, and it was profound. It almost felt like a remembering of something that was familiar to me. I was feeling sensations in my body that I've never felt before, and I was feeling at peace and releasing emotions. And ultimately, the Reiki class opened me up. And what I mean by that is, over the next 7 days, I was physically purging all of the dense energy from my body for my entire life. And it was needed for me to be able to step into the next part of my path. And the next morning, I remember waking up. It was quiet. It was peaceful. And we all know we have that voice in the back of our head that's keeping us safe. It's our ego telling us what to do and what not to do. But this morning was different. I woke up and I didn't hear anything. But as I got out of bed, I heard a soft whisper. What I didn't know at the time, it was my soul. And my soul told me that I needed to take off the week of work to process and to integrate what was occurring. My soul also told me that I needed to take a step back from social media and to go within. And I did. During the week that I was in this peaceful state, one of my extended family members was transitioning into hospice. And my soul guided me to send him Reiki. I know I only learned Reiki 1, but I also knew that I felt like I could help by sending him peace and ease during this time that he was in. I connected and I set my intentions. And what happened was I started clairvoyantly seeing what was going on in that exact moment that he was experiencing at his house, which was later confirmed by family members. And a few days later, he did end up passing. That opened more gifts up. I then began to be able to connect with him. And not only with him, but my loved ones who have passed through different signs and synchronicities. And the more that I was able to understand these signs and synchronicities, the more I was able to receive. And it was beautiful. I remember as I was returning to work, I felt like I was living 2 lives. I had one foot into the physical world, the world we can see. The other foot was in the spiritual world and the unseen. And I went to work, I did my job, but I was open up to this new perspective about life, and I was finally excited again. And I dove in to all of the information I could to understand what was going on. I listened to podcasts, videos, I read books, anything that felt like it would be helpful to understand what was happening. The more I opened up, the more of what was coming through. And I needed to understand what was happening on a deeper level. I ended up going to 2 different psychic mediums who confirmed that what I was experiencing was something my soul chose to do in this lifetime, and that it is one of my gifts to be able to communicate with the spiritual world. Looking back, growing up, I've always had a fascination with the spiritual world. I remember reading my first John Edwards book when I was 17, when my grandmother passed away. I was obsessed with watching Teresa Caputo on TV that I even went to go see her live when she was first starting out. I was interested in astrology and little things growing up, like fortune tellers and card readings, palm readings, and understanding the future. So those little breadcrumbs were signs that it was going to eventually lead up to this. Now, with my psychic gifts coming online, I became an antenna. When I went to work, I was picking up on all energy. And I don't want to use the words good or bad, but we'll just say some of the dense energy as well. I was picking up on people's intentions. I was getting information that I felt like I shouldn't know. And it became very overwhelming. And they say, when the student is ready, a teacher appears. And this is what happened. I was guided to a new teacher. And I knew in my soul that this is what I needed. It was an energetic foundational class, specifically for empaths and people who are energetically sensitive. Little did I know, what I was also signing up for was a channeling course. It was perfect. I began to learn techniques to help with my energy, as well as being able to function in everyday life with these new gifts that came online. As I was beginning to understand the language of spirit, I was getting the guidance that I needed to leave the current job that I had. This was a huge leap of faith. I just felt still overstimulated, and I just needed a change. And spirit lined something up so easily for me. And I was able to transition into the healthcare setting, working in assisted living facilities where the environment was the complete opposite of what I was used to in education. It was low stimulation. I was able to be more autonomous with my schedule, and it was all of the things that I was looking for. I didn't think about this though. Although those were amazing benefits, assisted living facilities, there was a lot of energy there. My mediumship abilities were in overdrive with the spirit energy there, as well as picking up on my client's pain. And I began to start taking that in as well. And within a few weeks, I realized that this wasn't the job for me. I didn't feel that spark in my soul. I didn't feel that passion. However, I stuck it out. And another teacher appeared. And I decided to move forward with a 6-month mediumship mentorship with the intention that maybe I was supposed to be a medium. Maybe this is what I was here to do. I started the mediumship mentorship, and I thought that it was for the purpose of being able to connect with spirit, being able to interpret what I was receiving, and how to do a reading. But mediumship held up a mirror to me, because as we know, as above, so below. What was going on internally was a direct reflection of what was going on in my outer environment. My mediumship journey started a dark night of the soul for me, as I began going into deep reprogramming of old subconscious beliefs, past conditioning, and patterns that no longer served me. And at the time, it was very difficult. But looking back, it was absolutely necessary. I had to release relationships that were no longer serving me, as well as other situations that I once held on so tightly to. And it felt like a year of endings. It felt like a year of the snake, where I was consistently shedding skin. And every day I would wake up, have a death, and then be reborn again. And it was quite intense. I showed up for myself every single day. I stayed in observer mode. I saw what was coming up, and I worked through it. I began to develop a strong relationship with myself in that period of stillness. I learned what energy was actually mine versus the energy that I was receiving from others my entire life. As a result of these practices and being able to connect more deeply with myself, I was able to develop my intuition and my clairs at an even stronger rate, which then opened me up even more. Not only was I able to connect with past loved ones and ancestors, it opened me up to higher realms, the archangels, the ascended masters, the galactics. I knew nothing about these things, but I went in with an open mind and an open heart. And knowing that the more I released, the more I was able to step into my soul mission and my purpose, was worth it. Every single day of me showing up. My body, my soul, whispers got louder and louder and louder with my job. I ended up transitioning from part-time to a per diem as needed position, and eventually took another leap of faith. And for me, this was very scary, because this time I had no backup plan. I was completely surrendering. And I realized that Spirit was leading me up to this with developing my self-trust through that season of the dark night of the soul. I ended up quitting. After leaving, I felt a huge sense of a weight lifted off my shoulders and a sense of freedom I've never experienced before. For the time to come after that, I was able to step into more of my feminine energy. And I realized my entire life I was in my masculine energy with everything that I did. And that is normal for our society, which caused the burnout and the stress cycles that I experienced. And this year that I experienced after leaving my job was filled with so much joy and fun and play and excitement. I was finally able to choose what I wanted to create, what I wanted to do, what lit me up. And I was able to travel to some amazing places that I never would have been able to do if I still had my job. I wouldn't have had the time, and it wouldn't have lined up. And those travel experiences were quantum leaps for me. I was able to spend more time in nature, reconnecting to my energy and reconnecting to the earth, the elementals, the animals, which then open my gifts up even more. Being able to communicate with animals and plants, and mostly every living being. It opened my eyes up to this sense of beauty that I've never experienced before. When I had my blinders on, when I was in this survival state, I wasn't able to experience the gratitude and the love that I have for the world that we live in. And to be in flow and in harmony with nature and life was incredibly beautiful. And I'm so grateful that I was able to experience that. I never thought I could experience peace and love and joy and ease and abundance in everyday life. For so long, I took on what society told me, what my family told me about the world. And this is not their fault, as they were doing the same thing that they learned from their parents. But this taught me that another option exists. There's another way. And how freeing is that? We all have a spiritual team. We all have guides. We all have angels. I'm not special. Everyone has this. Everyone has access to this. It is so important to be present and to even just ask for a simple sign, to know that you're not alone. You've been feeling lost or disconnected, or feeling like you have a deeper calling. You do. We all have a higher purpose in this lifetime. And we can start small. It doesn't have to be something as dramatic as quitting your job tomorrow. It's all about returning home to ourselves. And that could be something as simple as being more intentional and present. Maybe it's taking a few deep breaths. Maybe it's before you go to bed, you're taking those deep breaths and you're sitting in stillness and journaling. Setting an intention for your day. Asking for a sign from your guides. There's so many little things that you can do to bring your life more into alignment and harmony and on your soul's path. And if you made it to the end of this video, thank you. Thank you. I just had a loss of words because I can already feel the energy of the people that are going to be watching this video. And I just want you to know that you're never alone. You're unconditionally loved, you're supported, and you're guided. And I know the world may feel chaotic with what is going on. Everything that is happening is for our highest good. We are so deeply supported. If this message resonates, please click like, please comment below. If you have any comments or questions, I am happy and open to receive them. Just place it below and I will read and go through them, as it may lead to other topics to share about my experience. I'm so grateful that you watched this, and I'm sending you so much love today. Thank you.